guys, welcome back to Who, What, Where, a true crime podcast. We're your hosts, Caitlin,
Hannah, and Abigail.
If you've never listened before, just know this is a very chatty girls' night sleepover type podcast. We will speculate and theorize a lot, so if that's not your jam, we totally understand. But if it is, you can tune in every Monday for a full-length episode, and then come back every Friday for a Freaky Fast Friday episode, where we give you the rundown on a case, sometimes unsolved, always freaky, in 30 minutes or less. Hey guys, welcome back to a full-length episode of the Who, What, Where podcast. We are going to talk about Lisa Montgomery this week, and I'm going to try to be as gentle as possible with a lot of my wording, because this case is extremely sensitive, and there's a lot that goes into play with, like, as far as the mental state of the perpetrator, and basically, it's very gruesome and pretty graphic, like the crime itself is. And I know everybody has different opinions on the death penalty, and so I'm going to try to say it as, like, unbiased as possible. I chose this case because Montgomery just recently became the first woman scheduled to be executed in 67 years.
Wow.
So
that's crazy. The
Trump administration kind of just recently picked up this year again with executing people. The last time, like, anybody was executed at the federal level, so this is for federal crimes, so the Justice Department is in charge of executing these people, essentially. So this is going to be the first time since, like, 2003, I believe. But yeah, and then she will be the first woman that's executed in 67 years, so there's not a lot of women executed at the federal level, just because there's not a ton of women that commit federal crimes.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I read this Time article, Time magazine, and there's a lot of people that have been writing letters to President Trump asking him to commute her sentence into a life sentence without parole. He does have the ability to do that. A governor could do that too, but I'm pretty sure because it's a federal crime that it has to be the president.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have been writing letters to him, like several huge, like, gender rights people have written letters to him, lots of professors. ACLU is involved. Basically, clemency from the President of the United States is the only option for her at this point, because every single one of her appeals has been rejected. So her current execution date, it actually got pushed back. It was supposed to be December 8th. It is currently January 12th of next year. So
if they can push it back a little bit longer.
It's understood that the Biden administration, it's understood that they are probably going to continue with the no execution thing that's been going on for the last 17 years. Essentially, because it's possible that Biden would just commute it to a life sentence without parole. It got pushed back because it was supposed to be in December, and essentially Montgomery's lawyers, having to go to the prison so often, they contracted COVID, both of them, and they are obviously sick from that and unable to provide her counsel, and not having legal counsel is... Because basically, towards the day that you're going to be executed, like, there's a lot of stuff that you can prepare to get some kind of last-minute delay or last-minute stay of execution. So it doesn't necessarily say that you're never going to be executed. Only really the president can do that at this point. But it can postpone it until you can make more appeals, essentially. So this crime committed by Lisa Montgomery, she was 36 at the time. She was living in Melbourne, Kansas. And then Bobby Joe Stinnett, the victim in this crime, although there's technically two victims, Bobby Joe Stinnett was the one that was killed. She was a 23-year-old woman living in Skidmore, Missouri. As a child, Lisa Montgomery was physically and sexually abused by her stepfather, and additionally had a bad relationship with her mother. It is believed by some family members that her mother in some way blames her for their divorce, even though her mother adamantly denies this claim. In August of 1986, 18-year-old Lisa married her stepbrother Carl Bowman.
Interesting.
Weird.
First
red flag.
It is pretty widely believed that she was in some way coerced into doing that. From January 1987, she had 4 children in as many years. So she had a baby, and then by around that time next year, she had another baby. So she had 4 children in 4 years, essentially.
Wow.
In 1990, Lisa underwent a cauterization procedure of her fallopian tubes, essentially sterilizing her. So there was literally no chance she could be pregnant because the egg couldn't be released from the fallopian tube. Just a very specific way to get sterilized.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why?
I mean, probably because she didn't want to have more friggin' kids because she had 4.
I was just thinking
it's a very specific way.
Or...
I think it is also extremely speculated that she was bullied into that as well.
Okay.
Like, a lot of people believe her to be a victim of essentially sex trafficking. Like, a lot of people were like, she was forced to marry her stepbrother. She was forced to pop out 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, essentially like a mule. That's a lot of kids.
In a very
short period of time.
Well, and not to mention she had some serious trauma from the sexual abuse she underwent at the hand of her stepfather. So while her and Bowman were separated in 1994, Montgomery made one of several pregnancy claims. She did this pretty often. It wasn't like rare for her to pretend she was pregnant to get attention, most likely. But she always, whenever Bowman and her reconciled, she always just gave it up and was like, oh, I'm not actually pregnant. They eventually divorced in 1998. So they were married for 18 years. No, not 18. 12?
86 to 98.
12.
Yeah.
They were married for 12 years. And they had 4 children together. In 2000, before she and Kevin were married, Kevin was her husband at the time of the crime. He at one point gave her $40 for an abortion. So she essentially told him she was pregnant and she couldn't have the baby, and he gave her $40 to have an abortion. In 2002, she began telling people she was pregnant and told Kevin she was being seen for prenatal care. After her due date came and went, she told Kevin the baby had died and she had donated its body to science. So it became a pretty regular thing for her to, for one reason or another, say she was pregnant and act pregnant. Like, she would like wear maternity clothes and she would like do certain behaviors that only pregnant people do. So like not drinking or pretending to be sick in some way.
So obviously there's some mental
illness
going on here.
Yeah, I mean, it's mental illness in it.
Wait, so did you find any like theories on why she did that?
So there's actually a psychological disorder. I have the name of it written in here, but it causes you to regularly believe that you're pregnant.
But so did she really believe it, or did she know that she was lying to people?
It depends on whether or not you believe that she has this psychological disorder. Let me find the name of it really quick. Pseudocyesis.
Oh, which would mean like fake pregnancy.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
okay.
It's believed that she suffered from that mental disorder. So in April 2004, Lisa Montgomery met Bobby Joe Stinnett at a dog show. Both of them were really into breeding dogs. Bobby specifically bred rat terriers, and she bred them out of her home, and she had like a website called Happy Haven Farms. They were both, basically Bobby Joe was very like active on social media. It wouldn't even really have been social media at the time. I guess MySpace and early days of Facebook.
Yeah.
Stinnett became pregnant in spring of 2004, and this was well known by everybody. Like, even though Montgomery lived pretty far from her and they weren't necessarily friends, like, she definitely would have known this.
Okay.
Like, there's really no way she wouldn't have known this. Around this time, Montgomery began telling people she was pregnant, even though, I mean, it's a regular thing, really. Yeah. She began telling people she was pregnant around the same time that Stinnett became pregnant, and even though people close to her knew she had undergone a sterilization procedure, she just did it anyway, basically. Her husband at the time didn't know. So Kevin didn't know that she was sterilized. Especially because she was acting as though she was pregnant. Again, she was wearing maternity clothes. She was, like, not drinking.
Was she wearing, like, a fake stomach?
No.
Ever?
Like, she was... That's why, like, what kind of sex life did these people have that he never saw her pregnant? Or never saw her naked to see that she wasn't pregnant?
But they were having sex enough for him to believe her.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I
also just think men maybe
are just not
don't know as well. Certain men.
Plus,
certain women don't really know how it works.
You don't show until like the second trimester.
Yeah,
usually.
but the one pregnancy that she faked, she said that she carried it all the way to term, and then the baby died at birth.
Yeah.
So, like, you would look pregnant, right?
Maybe she pulled like, she was just like, well, I'm pregnant. I'm not interested in any like sexual encounters. That could be a thing too.
Maybe. Well, and Kevin didn't have any children of his own, as far as I know. So
he's probably excited.
However, they were caring for 2 of Lisa's minor children at the time. Like, they lived with them.
Okay.
So it's not like they were trying to have children. Montgomery at this time was fighting for the custody of the 2 minor children that lived with her and Kevin, with Bowman and his new wife. Bowman and his new wife knew that she was sterilized, and they threatened to use her false pregnancy claims as some kind of like, hey, she's mentally ill, we should get full custody. Like, they threatened to use this against her in trial. On December 10th of 2004, Bowman filed a motion for a change of custody of the 2 children living with Montgomery. On December 15th, Montgomery instant messaged Stinnett about purchasing a puppy from her. She used the fake name Darlene Fisher and claimed to be from Fairfax, Missouri, which is not far from Skidmore. So she planned on driving all the way from Kansas, even though she lied and told Stinnett that she lived closer. Stinnett told her husband and her mother that someone was stopping by to look at the puppies. So they all, like, people knew that somebody was stopping by. Like, that's the thing. Like, she wouldn't necessarily have gotten away with it for very long. But depending on how mentally ill or delusional you believe she was, she probably didn't care, you know?
Yeah.
So the next day, December 16th, Montgomery arrived around 12:30 p.m. and she was carrying a kitchen knife and a white cord at the time. So at 2:30, Stinnett's mother called her and they confirmed that Stinnett would pick her up from work in an hour. So between 12:30 and 2:30, they were like playing with the puppies, and I'm sure Montgomery was continuing the ruse of
like, she's going to buy a
planning
puppy.
on buying a puppy from you. Soon after, Montgomery attacked Stinnett and strangled her with the cord. She then cut open Stinnett's stomach with the kitchen knife and took the child out. So performed a C-section on her, basically. She cut the umbilical cord as well. So somehow the baby survived this.
Wow. Like, the baby's alive today?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. She lives with her father.
This is crazy.
It's pretty sad. Like I said, sad in like a lot of ways. Obviously, it's sad because this mother died for her baby, and the court document that I was reading said that Montgomery strangled Stinnett like with the cord, and she wasn't dead. She was just passed out. But as soon as she started cutting into her, it woke her up, and so Montgomery had to strangle her again, and this is what killed her.
So she was probably like
so
tortured.
it's possible that she wasn't even completely dead when Montgomery left. Like,
but she like bled out.
It's possible that she bled out. I mean,
it's not like she was like being careful and stitching her up or anything. Yeah,
It honestly seems it's very frenzied to me that she just like cut her stomach open. You know. So Stinnett was 8 months pregnant when this happened.
Okay.
So it makes sense that the baby lived, I guess.
It does make sense, but I mean, somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're doing performed a C-section on her.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Well, it's not surprising that Stinnett died, but it's reasonable that the baby lived. So Montgomery drove away. She started driving in Topeka, Kansas after cleaning. So at first she was holding the baby like while she was driving.
Oh my god, Jesus.
In Topeka, Kansas, she started cleaning the baby with wipes, and she suctioned mucus from its nose, kind of made sure that it was breathing. Montgomery placed her in a car seat that she had hidden in her trunk. This is premeditation.
Oh, for sure.
She called her husband to tell him that she had given birth suddenly at a women's clinic in Topeka while Christmas shopping.
What the hell?
He met her in a parking lot near the clinic the supposed clinic that she gave birth in. And they drove home to Melbourne, and so they drove in Kevin's car, and Montgomery's daughter and son drove her car home. I'm assuming that the baby was with Kevin and Lisa. The next day, after prancing around town, they went to breakfast with the baby. They introduced a bunch of people to their new daughter, Abigail. The police arrived at the Montgomery's door, finally. So literally the very next day. Montgomery initially claimed that due to money trouble, she had given birth to the baby at home by herself because she didn't want to financially burden Kevin, is what she was saying.
After she told him that she had given birth at a clinic. Yeah.
Well, the
But
thing
she
is
couldn't say that because there'd be proof.
there would have been records, yeah. And when Kevin was still in the room, she was still using the whole I gave birth at a clinic ruse.
Okay.
And then, like, to the cops when Kevin wasn't there, she was like, oh, actually, I gave birth at home. Because Kevin, like, went to go get the discharge papers from the car, and they didn't exist, obviously.
What the fuck?
Yeah, a little insane. So, she didn't have any, like, corroborating witnesses for giving birth at home because at first she was like, oh, my friends were there. But then she was like, oh, they were actually just on the phone in case something went wrong. So, like, there was no way to prove her story, essentially.
Uh-huh.
And actually later on they did do it uses the suffix hister. It's some kind of, like, exploratory, like, surgery so that they could find out if she was capable of having children. Basically, I think at some point Lisa realized that she was caught, and she asked the interview to be moved to the sheriff's office. Here, she confessed to killing Stinnett, removing her child from the womb, and abducting the child. And actually, since she had taken the child across state lines, that's when this became a federal crime.
Gotcha.
Because otherwise it would have been state level, and it's possible she wouldn't have gotten the death penalty for it. The child was later named Victoria Jo, and she currently lives with her father.
Father of, like, biological father?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I was just checking.
Yeah, Bobby Jo had a husband.
Okay.
Yeah. This was their first child, though. This was their first and only child.
That would be for the husband.
Well, how do you tell your kid that one day? Oh, yeah, you were...
I'm sure he waited till she was
ripped from
if
your
she's
mother's
16,
stomach.
you probably just recently told her.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I would have waited.
But you would have to tell her, because otherwise, what if she found out at, like, school, or, you know, she found out some other way that she was.
The world is a harsh place.
That she was this like
it is.
victim of this horrible crime. Yeah,
it's terrible.
So Lisa Montgomery was charged with kidnapping resulting in death, and due to the especially heinous nature of the crime, in October 2007, so this is approximately 3 years after the incident, the jury in Missouri.
Missouri. Rhymes.
Murder's not funny. They recommended the death penalty, and this, they unanimously recommended this.
Mm-hmm.
And the penalty was officially handed down by U.S. District Judge Gary A. Fenner in Kansas City, Missouri. Montgomery's attorney, Fred Ducart, spent most of the trial claiming that she should be spared the death penalty because of all the sexual abuse she had experienced as a child and the subsequent mental illness that stemmed from this.
Mm-hmm.
He is quoted as saying, the one good thing that's happened in all this for Lisa is that she's on medications to deal with her mental health issues. One of her public defenders, Kelly Henry, argued it would be a profound injustice to execute her due to her severe mental illness caused by childhood trauma. During a pre-trial hearing, a neuropsychologist testified that she had suffered a head injury that likely affected her ability to control aggression.
Oh. So
most likely it affected her prefrontal cortex. Additionally, during trial, attorneys asserted she suffered from pseudopsoriasis. This is a psychological disorder where the sufferer falsely believes they are pregnant and outwardly acts as though they are.
So they truly
believe it. So she wasn't aware
some kind
that
of neuroses. Yeah.
Right. She wasn't aware that she was, like, lying to people. She truly believed that she was pregnant.
Yeah,
right?
most
That's
likely.
What's understood there.
Like,
sort of. Okay.
I mean, I think it's one of those things that this is if you believe she had that.
Right.
Another neuroscientist, V.S. Ramachandran, testified that her fluctuating levels of delusion led to her changing her story often. So, like, she would kind of go in and out of reality, and that's why she
sometimes would
changed her story a lot.
Yeah.
No, well, when she changed her story on what happened when she kidnapped the baby and killed Bobby Joe.
Interesting. That sounds like a defense mechanism, kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
in a way.
so like, obviously I'm not like a psychologist, so I can't necessarily diagnose her. And a lot of these, first of all, she wasn't diagnosed on anything until she was in the care of like treatment at the jail.
Yeah.
So, Ramachandran also testified that she was predisposed for pseudocyesis because of the trauma that she experienced as a child. She could have had a serious amount of trauma from her like early 4 pregnancies, because she was pregnant essentially as soon as she was a legal adult, like constantly for like 4 years essentially.
Yeah, or maybe she, like, her trauma combined with her being pregnant consistently, like, made her feel strange when she wasn't pregnant. Like, she was so used to being pregnant that her like mind convinced her that she was. I don't know, that seems like
I don't know a ton about pseudocyesis, so.
And this is another just like kind of weird theory, but I wonder if she was being sexually assaulted or like coerced by her stepbrother, who was then her husband. If maybe when she was pregnant, she wasn't experiencing that, and so maybe that could be why she wanted to always be pregnant.
It was like a defense.
It
was like a defense mechanism, yeah.
Because a lot of the time,
especially if he was like forcing her to get pregnant, and he really wanted the children, it would make sense that he wouldn't like be like abusive with her. It actually happens a lot
that men like won't have sexual activity with their pregnant significant others because of like fear of losing the baby. So
yeah,
which isn't true, but whatever.
That's besides the point.
Unless you're on pelvic rest, but
yeah. All in all, everyone, especially Lisa, admits that she was fully responsible for this. And she will spend the rest of her life in prison, rightfully, even if she is commuted from the death sentence to life in prison. Lisa admits that she was wrong and that she deserves her punishment.
That's good.
The Justice Department carried out 3 executions in 4 days this July. So this is what I was talking about, how this is why a lot of people are like, Lisa Montgomery shouldn't be executed. This is more executions than what was conducted in the previous 3 decades. So
wow.
Around like the early 2000s is when they first started using pentobarbital, and they first they were using like a drug, so lethal injection. But this is also kind of around the time when they started being like, maybe we shouldn't be executing people so willy-nilly, I guess.
Because there could be other factors
contributing. By the time President Trump leaves office, 10 executions will have taken place if Montgomery's goes through. Montgomery is the only woman on federal death row. Federal death row means that the Justice Department of the United States is directly in charge of her execution. So Justice Department falls under the presidential administration. Yeah. This is compared to 52 women on state death rows. So a lot of these women are in states that have capital punishment, but they don't actively like do it. Like especially Washington. In California, like about half of the women that are on state death rows are in California, and California does not they haven't executed somebody in a long time. So on November 11th of this year, law professor Lee Goodmark, a gender violence scholar, wrote a letter to President Trump urging him to commute Lisa Montgomery's sentence to life without parole. She uses the reasoning that Montgomery experienced severe abuse as a child, including rape, incest, domestic violence, as well as the fact that Montgomery was likely pushed to marry her stepbrother and was pretty much bred like a pig and then forced to get sterilized. So this law professor essentially is like, we can't reasonably execute this woman because you can't separate her crimes from her mental state. Like they go hand in hand.
Because all of her abuse centered around sexual trauma and pregnancy, and that's what her crimes also centered around. So they're totally relevant to each other.
Yeah, Goodmark argues that she suffers from dissociative identity disorder as well as extremely complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So dissociative identity disorder would explain the delusions and like her kind of not remember, like she never admits to blacking out during the C-section of Bobby Joe. Like she remembers all of it, so that's just an interesting thing to bring up, because most people with DID don't remember when their alternate personalities were doing stuff, you know.
Interesting. So it's possible.
They just have like no memory of that.
But also CPTSD is different than just PTSD. So complex is different. And obviously her situation is very complex. And yeah.
It's well understood that most men that commit capital murder, so like this is murder that you can be put to death for, they have some history. Like nobody like their first crime like murder somebody usually. Like it's very rare. Women, however, tend to be out of their right mind when committing crimes, and there's like studies done that, and there's statistics to back this up. Like usually it's some kind of like crime of passion. It's usually a crime of passion when it comes to women, and many argue that this is the case with Lisa Montgomery. So
even if there's a little bit of speculation that she shouldn't be killed, then we shouldn't kill her. No, because that's not the humane thing to do to me. And I think that she deserves to be medicated and go through treatment and therapy and get better, because her whole life has been traumatic. And I think that she, like, everybody deserves to have a little bit of happiness in their life at some point. Yeah. And I don't know, this honestly is like it's very sad. It's tragic. Very sad.
It's a tragic
It requires a great amount of like tiptoeing, because I don't know, a lot of people probably have pretty strong opinions about this case, and I feel like arguing whether she should get the death penalty or not could easily offend the family of this woman who was killed. She was 23. So there is a lot of drama and like speculation surrounding this case. It all has to do with whether or not Lisa should be executed. Right. Like there's not really like any people arguing like she didn't brutally murder somebody. Like most people are like, should she get the death penalty, or should we take her mental state into account? And it kind of just makes you look at the death penalty and like, is it kind of barbaric in a way? Like a lot of people believe it is, and a lot of people believe that it is kind of wrong to murder somebody who was clearly in a delusional state. Whether or not she remembers it, whether or not she admitted to it, those are kind of things that I guess will test our justice system for whether or not it actually means that somebody's getting justice. All right, guys, that's our episode for this week. Thanks for tuning in and joining us.
Kind of a dark episode.
Yeah, a little bit.
Sorry
a little
about
bit dark,
that.
a little bit.
But it has some interesting topics to think about, I suppose.
It does have, and it brings up a lot of stuff that is, again, out of the scope of this podcast. So you guys can definitely let us know in our YouTube comments, though, what you guys think of this. You can also follow us on Instagram at Who What Where Podcast. We're going to post some relevant pictures over there. You guys can leave us a comment on that as well. You could follow us. That'd be awesome. We also have a Facebook page. But yeah, we will be back in a few short days with another episode. So thanks for joining us.